My name is Judith Morris, and I'm standing in the parking lot of Riverside Country Club with my car keys in one hand and 5 years of silence in the other. The marble columns gleam in the afternoon sun. String quartet music drifts through the open doors. My son is getting married inside, and my ex-husband has no idea I actually came. Let me tell you how I got here. 3 weeks ago, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in 5 years. Richard's voice on the other end, careful and measured, like he was negotiating a business deal. Judith, Oliver's getting married next month. You should come to the wedding. Not, I'm sorry. Not, we miss you. Not, can we talk about what happened? Just an invitation delivered like an obligation he was checking off a list. If this story hits home, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Every betrayal I share comes with a twist you won't see coming. 7th. My hands shook as I held that phone. 5 years since I'd heard his voice. 5 years since I'd walked out of the house where I'd been systematically erased from my own life. 5 years since my husband and son had treated me like furniture, like background noise, like I simply didn't exist. But here's what Richard didn't know. I'd spent every single day of those 5 years becoming someone they could never erase again. Have you ever been invisible in your own home? Have you ever watched the people you love look right through you like you're not even there? Tell me in the comments, because what happened to me could happen to anyone. And what I did about it might just inspire you. The erasure didn't start suddenly. It crept in slowly, like frost forming on a window. So gradual you don't notice until one day you realize you can't see through the glass anymore. I'm originally from Cornwall, England. Moved to Boston 22 years ago when I was 21 and stupidly in love with Richard Morris, a charming American businessman I'd met at an architecture conference in London. He made me laugh. He said my accent was adorable. He promised me an adventure. I gave up my position at a prestigious London architecture firm to follow him across the Atlantic. We married within 6 months. Oliver was born a year later, and I thought I'd found my fairy tale. But fairy tales don't prepare you for the slow erosion of yourself. Richard was controlling from the start, but I mistook it for American confidence. He made all the major decisions. He managed our finances. He determined where we'd live, what car I'd drive, how we'd raise Oliver. I told myself this was just how American marriages worked, that I was still adjusting to a new culture. I was wrong. By the time Oliver was 5, Richard had started excluding me from boys' activities. Father-son baseball games, camping trips, video game sessions. You wouldn't understand American sports, he'd say with that patronizing smile. This is a guy thing. Oliver absorbed this. By age 10, he'd started using his father's dismissive tone with me. By 15, he openly sided with Richard in every disagreement. By 18, when we were choosing his university, my input wasn't just ignored, it was mocked. Mom doesn't understand how American colleges work, Oliver would say. My British title turned into something embarrassing rather than endearing. I sacrificed everything trying to earn their respect. I worked part-time at a local architecture firm, bringing in money while managing our entire household. I planned every holiday, every birthday party, every family event. I supported Oliver through school struggles Richard was too busy to notice. I made myself smaller and quieter and more convenient, thinking that's what good wives and mothers did. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. The systematic ignoring campaign began last year. Month 1 through 3, Richard started working late, constantly. Month 4 through 6, father-son activities were deliberately scheduled during my only free time. Month 7 through 9, our joint bank account mysteriously started depleting. Then month 10 arrived, and they stopped acknowledging my existence entirely. Day 1, I came downstairs to find them eating breakfast they'd made without me. I said good morning. Neither responded. I thought maybe they hadn't heard me. Day 5, I realized they'd heard me perfectly. They were choosing not to respond. Day 10, Oliver asked Richard, "Did you hear something?" like weird white noise. While looking directly at me, Richard didn't even glance up from his phone. Just the house settling, son. The house settling. That's what I'd become. Background noise in my own life. By day 30, I was checking mirrors to confirm I still had a reflection. I was touching walls to verify I could interact with physical objects. I actually Googled, "Can you be dead and not know it?" At 2 a.m, which tells you everything about my mental state. That evening, I found the divorce papers. Richard's briefcase sat by the back door, positioned for Monday morning, even though it was Saturday. Richard never packed his briefcase early. My instincts screamed that something was wrong. Inside, tucked in the side pocket, I found legal documents. Petition for dissolution of marriage, read the header in cold, official typeface. Spencer had already signed his name. Dated 3 days earlier, the same day I'd suggested we have lunch together and he'd walked past me like I was invisible. A sticky note was attached. 3 words in Richard's precise handwriting. Sign here. Not, "I'm sorry this didn't work out." Not, "We need to talk." Not even, "I want a divorce." Just instructions, like I was an employee being terminated. I stood in my kitchen, holding papers that ended 20 years of marriage, and felt something fundamental crack open inside my chest. Not breaking, hardening, but they had no idea what was coming next. I need you to understand how we got to that moment. How a marriage that began with laughter and promises turned into systematic erasure. Because this didn't happen overnight. Richard built this demolition carefully, brick by brick, month by month, year by year. It started when I was pregnant with Oliver. Richard suggested I take a temporary break from architecture works. "Just until the baby comes," he said. "Then we'll figure out childcare." That temporary break became permanent. Every time I mentioned returning to work, Richard had reasons why it wasn't practical. Oliver needed me home. Childcare was too expensive. My architecture license would need updating for American standards. Wouldn't I rather be present for our son's childhood? I convinced myself he was right. I was a mother now. That was my priority. But being a mother in Richard's house meant something specific. It meant I did all the parenting labor while he got all the parenting glory. I packed lunches and attended teacher conferences and helped with homework and drove to activities and managed doctor appointments and stayed up with sick children. Richard swooped in for the fun parts. Baseball games, movie nights, pizza dinners, teaching Oliver to ride a bike. Oliver learned early that Dad was fun, and Mum was the one who made him eat vegetables and do homework. When Oliver was 8, my mother passed away in Cornwall. She left me her entire estate. A beautiful stone house overlooking the Atlantic, 2 rental cottages on the property, and 12 acres of coastal land. The property had been in her family for generations. Richard immediately wanted to sell it. "We could use that money for Oliver's future," he said. "What are you going to do with property in England? You live here now." For once, I stood firm. That property is my inheritance. My connection to home. I'm keeping it. Richard's face went cold. "Your home is here, Judith, with your family. Unless you're saying we're not enough for you." But I didn't sell. I hired a property manager to handle the rentals. The income, about £4,000 monthly, went into a separate account Richard never touched. It was the only thing that remained completely mine. He never forgave me for that defiance. The favoritism patterns intensified as Oliver grew. Richard positioned himself as the competent parent and me as the foreign one who didn't understand American culture. When Oliver struggled in school, Richard blamed my parenting style. When Oliver excelled at something, Richard took credit for his guidance. "Your mother doesn't understand American sports," Richard would say. "Your mother's English sensibilities don't apply here," he'd tell Oliver. "Mum's just being dramatic," became Oliver's standard response to my concerns. Every single time I tried to assert myself as an equal parent, Richard undermined me. Not loudly or obviously, but with subtle comments that positioned me as less capable, less American, less relevant. By the time Oliver was 15, I'd lost all parental authority. He'd roll his eyes when I spoke. He'd check with Richard before agreeing to anything I suggested. He'd make plans without telling me, then act surprised when I felt excluded. "I told Dad," he'd say, as if that was sufficient. As if I was just support staff who didn't need to be kept informed. I kept trying. Kept making special dinners Oliver liked. Kept attending his school events even when neither of them acknowledged my presence. Kept reaching out, kept hoping, kept shrinking myself smaller and smaller, trying to fit into the space they'd allow me. The professional sabotage started subtly. Richard began making comments to colleagues about my adjustment difficulties as an immigrant. He'd joke about my homesickness at dinner parties. He'd frame my attachment to my mother's property as an inability to fully commit to American life. When Oliver was 18 and choosing colleges, Richard actively excluded me from the process. They visited campuses together. They discussed majors and career paths. They filled out applications. I found out he'd been accepted to Boston University when the acceptance packet arrived in the mail. "Oh, I thought Dad would have told you," Oliver said when I asked why no one had mentioned it. "I thought Dad would have told you." As if keeping his mother informed wasn't his responsibility. As if I was an afterthought in my own son's life. That's when I started noticing the money. Our joint savings account had held $31,000 3 months earlier. Now it held $12,000. I checked the transaction history and found regular transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Small amounts at first, then increasingly larger. $500, $1,200, $2,000, $3,000. I confronted Richard. "Where's our savings going?" "Oliver's future," he said vaguely. "College expenses. You wouldn't understand the costs." But Oliver had scholarships. His tuition was covered. What college expenses required $19,000 in 3 months? I did something I'd never done before. I hired a forensic accountant. What she found made my stomach drop. Richard had opened a separate account 8 months earlier, in only his name. He'd been systematically moving money from our joint account to his private one. The total transferred, $47,000 over 8 months. While I'd been working part-time and managing our household, Richard had been building an escape fund, ensuring that when I left, I'd have almost nothing. But it got worse. My accountant found emails Richard had sent to Oliver's university counselor 6 months earlier. The subject line: "Family circumstances affecting student." I read those emails with growing horror. Richard had constructed an entire narrative. His wife was struggling with depression and adjustment issues, becoming increasingly unreliable and emotionally distant, creating instability in the home. He positioned himself as the heroic parent maintaining stability for Oliver despite his wife's mental health challenges. It was all lies. Systematic, documented lies designed to destroy my credibility. He'd sent similar emails to my part-time employer, hinting that I might need personal leave for health reasons. He'd mentioned my struggles to neighbors, to friends, to anyone who'd listen. For 8 months, Richard had been building a case that I was unstable, preparing the ground for my departure, ensuring that when I left, everyone would believe his version. The mentally ill wife who abandoned her family. The ignoring campaign was the final phase. Make conditions so unbearable that I'd leave, then claim abandonment. Frame it as my failure, my instability, my inability to handle being a wife and mother. With the bank evidence, the emails, the systematic poisoning of my reputation, Richard would win everything in divorce court. The house, the money, full custody of Oliver despite him being nearly an adult, minimal alimony because I was employable but had abandoned my family. I'd be left with nothing. No money, no credibility, no relationship with my son, no professional reputation. That's what I was facing when I found those divorce papers with the sticky note. I didn't sign them. Instead, I did something that would change everything. I went upstairs, packed a single duffel bag with essentials, left a brief note on my pillow, and walked out while Richard and Oliver watched television. They didn't notice me leave. They wouldn't notice for hours, maybe not until morning when they needed something from me. I drove to the train station and bought a ticket to Emma's house, 3 states away. Emma Walsh, my college friend from London, who'd also married an American, was the only person I trusted completely. The train left at 3:30 in the morning. I had 4 hours to wait. I didn't cry. I didn't call Richard. I didn't text Oliver. I sat on a metal bench in the fluorescent-lit station and felt, for the first time in 30 days, like I could breathe. When Emma opened her door at 7 in the morning and saw my face, she didn't ask questions. She pulled me inside, made tea the proper English way, and let me fall apart on her sofa. "I've lost everything," I said. "No," Emma replied firmly. "You've escaped. There's a difference." Over the next week, Emma helped me understand what had happened. Not a marriage falling apart, but systematic abuse. Financial abuse, emotional abuse, parental alienation. Richard had spent months building a trap designed to ensure I'd leave with nothing. But I hadn't signed those papers. And I had something Richard didn't know about. Documentation. During those final months, as I'd felt everything slipping away, I'd started keeping records. I'd photographed bank statements. I'd forwarded suspicious emails to a private account. I'd kept a journal documenting the ignoring campaign, the exclusion, the systematic erasure. I'd also kept my mother's inheritance completely separate. Richard couldn't touch the Cornwall property or the income it generated. Emma connected me with Anne Brennan, an attorney who specialized in financial abuse cases. Anne was 50-something, razor sharp, wore sensible shoes and no-nonsense suits, and had eyes that could calculate your financial worth in seconds. She read through my documentation, looked up at me, and smiled. "He made a critical mistake." "What mistake?" "He assumed you'd never figure it out. He assumed you'd stay broken. He forgot that invisible women see everything." Anne filed a countersuit that exposed every transfer, every email, every lie Richard had built. We requested full accounting of his separate accounts. We revealed the professional sabotage, the systematic narrative building, the deliberate poisoning of my relationship with Oliver. Richard's lawyer wasn't expecting an organized defense. He'd expected me to sign quickly, take whatever scraps they offered, and disappear quietly. Instead, we went to war. The divorce proceedings dragged on for 6 months. 6 months of depositions and document production and legal arguments. 6 months of Richard's lawyer painting me as an unstable woman who'd abandoned her family, while Anne systematically dismantled every lie with evidence. I didn't see Richard or Oliver during this time. I stayed with Emma, worked remotely for my architecture firm, and slowly began remembering who I'd been before I became Mrs. Richard Morris. Week 2 after I left, Oliver finally called. Not my new number at Emma's, which he didn't have. He called my old cell, the one I'd kept active, specifically hoping he might reach out. "Mum." His voice sounded uncertain, younger than his 19 years. "Where are you?" "I'm safe, Oliver. I'm staying with Emma. Dad says you're having some kind of breakdown, that you just left without explanation." Of course that's what Richard had told him. "I'm not having a breakdown. I left because I was being systematically erased from my own life." "That's not—" Oliver's voice hardened. "Dad says you're making dramatic accusations to avoid taking responsibility. He says you've always had problems adjusting to America, that you never really wanted to be here." "Oliver, that's not true. Your father has been—" "Sevens. I need you to sign the house over to us. It's affecting my college financial aid. You're being selfish." My heart cracked hearing my son, my child I'd raised, call me selfish for not giving away the house I'd helped buy and maintain for 20 years. I heard Richard's voice in the background, coaching. "Tell her she's putting her own interests above yours." "Oliver, Is your father with you right now? So what if he is? He's been there for me. Where have you been? I closed my eyes. The poisoning was complete. When you're ready to have an honest conversation, one where your father isn't coaching you, call me back. I hung up before he could respond. That night, Emma found me crying in her guest room. He believes everything Richard says. 20 years of being his mother, and he believes I'm the villain. Right now, he does, Emma said gently. Richard's had months to build that narrative. You left suddenly. From Oliver's perspective, you did abandon him. It'll take time for him to see the truth. What if he never does? Then you'll survive that too. Emma sat down beside me. Judith, you can't set yourself on fire to keep people warm. Oliver's an adult. He's responsible for his own choices now, including whether to seek the truth. The legal complications escalated. Richard's lawyer filed for emergency hearing, claiming the abandoned wife was unfit and attempting to access marital assets inappropriately. They tried to freeze my access to joint accounts, claiming I was depleting funds out of spite. Anne countered with evidence that Richard had already transferred $47,000 to his private account and requested the court freeze all his accounts pending investigation. Then Richard's lawyer made a critical error. They filed a motion claiming my Cornwall inheritance should be considered marital property, demanding 50% of its value in the divorce settlement. Anne nearly laughed when she read that motion. They just opened a door they're going to regret. Why? Because now we get to examine why you kept that property separate. We get to introduce evidence of Richard's controlling behavior, his financial abuse, his attempts to force you to sell. We get to show a pattern. The court hearing was scheduled for 4 months out. In the meantime, something unexpected happened. I received a job offer. A major architecture firm in Philadelphia had been following my work, the small projects I'd managed to complete while working part-time around Richard's restrictions. They wanted me as design director, leading their new division focused on transatlantic architectural fusion, blending European design principles with American construction. The salary was double what I'd earned at my part-time position. Full benefits, relocation assistance, professional respect. Take it, Emma said immediately. Take it and build your new life. But the divorce isn't final. The court case. Sevens. Anne can handle the case from Philadelphia. You need to move forward, Judith. Stop waiting for Richard to give you permission to exist. I accepted the position. I found a small apartment in Philadelphia's Fairmount neighborhood. I packed my duffel bag, thanked Emma for her sanctuary, and moved to a city where no one knew Mrs. Richard Morris. I was just Judith. Judith Morris, design director, woman rebuilding her life from ashes. The court date finally arrived. Richard showed up with his lawyer, looking confident and controlled in his expensive suit. He'd brought Oliver as a witness, a 20-year-old young man who'd sign an affidavit about his unreliable mother. I showed up with Anne, wearing a simple professional dress, carrying documentation that told the real story. The judge reviewed evidence for 3 hours. Bank transfers, emails to school counselors and employers, my journal documenting the ignoring campaign, character references from Emma and others who'd witnessed Richard's controlling behavior. Then Anne presented the Cornwall property documents. Inheritance from my mother, kept separate for 20 years, despite Richard's pressure to sell. Income never touched, proving I'd maintained financial independence even while Richard systematically undermined me. The judge looked at Richard with something like disgust. Mr. Morris, you transferred nearly $50,000 from joint accounts while building a narrative that your wife was unstable and unreliable. You contacted her employer to damage her professional reputation. You poisoned your son's relationship with his mother through systematic lies. This court finds your behavior constitutes financial abuse, emotional abuse, and parental alienation. Richard's confident expression cracked. The ruling: marital assets would be split 50-50. but I would retain the house until it sold, with proceeds divided equally. Richard would repay the transferred funds from his separate account. My Cornwall property remained completely mine, untouchable. No alimony for either party since we were both employed. Most importantly, the judge ordered family counseling between Oliver and me, with a therapist specializing in parental alienation. Oliver was legally an adult and couldn't be forced to attend, but the court was making clear that Richard's behavior had damaged our family relationships. Oliver sat in the courtroom hearing all of this, hearing documented evidence that his father had lied, manipulated, stolen. I watched his face cycle through denial, confusion, anger. He left without speaking to me. Richard's lawyer tried to appeal, but Anne had built an airtight case. The judgment stood. I walked out of that courthouse, legally free from Richard Morris. But I wasn't free from the damage he'd done. 5 years passed. 5 years of rebuilding myself from foundation to roof, like the architect I'd always been. 5 years of discovering who Judith Morris actually was when no one was telling her who to be. Year 1 was survival. Learning to sleep alone without the absence feeling like failure. Learning to cook meals for one without the empty chairs screaming at me. Learning to make decisions that affected only me. I threw myself into my work at the Philadelphia firm. Turns out, when you're not spending all your energy managing other people's needs, you have remarkable capacity for professional excellence. I led the Transatlantic Fusion Division, bringing European design sensibilities to American projects. My work was featured in Architectural Digest. I won industry awards. Year 2, I expanded my mother's Cornwall property, used the inheritance money to renovate the main house and add 2 additional luxury cottages. Created a high-end holiday rental estate that generated £12,000 monthly. I visited twice that year, walking the cliffs my mother had loved, reclaiming my heritage. Year 3, I published a book. Designing Your Second Act. Architecture of Reinvention. Half about architectural principles, half memoir about rebuilding after divorce. It became a bestseller in the design community, resonating with people who understood that sometimes you have to tear down to foundation before you can build something better. I made friends. Real friends, not couples we socialized with because Richard's work required it. Elena, a therapist who'd survived her own difficult divorce. Margaret, a university professor with a wicked sense of humor. James, a fellow architect who became my closest professional colleague. People who valued me for myself, not for what I could do for them. Year 4, I was promoted to vice president of design. I bought my own apartment, not rented, owned. Small but mine. I traveled for work, speaking at conferences in Chicago, San Francisco, Seattle, London. I dated occasionally, nothing serious, just reminding myself I was still a woman with interests and desires beyond being someone's wife and mother. Most importantly, I learned to like my own company. I discovered I preferred documentaries to sitcoms, spicy Thai food to bland comfort meals, sleeping late on Sundays without guilt. Simple preferences that should have existed decades ago, but had been suppressed under the weight of managing Richard and Oliver's needs. Year 5 arrived quietly. I was 48, successful, content. I had a life I'd built entirely myself. That's when Richard called. I almost didn't answer the unfamiliar number. Probably spam about extended car warranties. But something, instinct or curiosity or fate, made me pick up. Judith. His voice after 5 years of silence. Still smooth, still controlled, but carrying something I'd never heard before. Uncertainty. It's Richard. Every muscle in my body went rigid. Why are you calling? I wasn't sure this was still your number. It is. I didn't elaborate, didn't help him, didn't make this easier. What do you want, Richard? He took a breath. Oliver's getting married. Next month. I thought. You should know. You should come. My son was getting married. My 24-year-old son to someone I'd never met, at a wedding I'd never been told about, living a life I knew nothing about. Married, I repeated, buying time to process. To whom? A wonderful young woman named Sophia Chen. They met at university, been together 2 years. The wedding's at Riverside Country Club on the 16th. 2 years. He'd been engaged, planning a wedding, and I was learning about it a month before the ceremony. Why are you inviting me, Richard? 5 years of silence, and suddenly I'm supposed to show up at Oliver's wedding. Because you're his mother. A pause. And because he asks about you sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. That nearly broke me. Sometimes my son wondered about his mother. Not often, but sometimes. But I heard something else in Richard's voice. Something underneath the careful words. He was afraid. Does Oliver know you're calling me? Not exactly. But he mentioned he wished things were different. That he wished you were around. Translated. Oliver felt guilty, but wasn't ready to reach out himself. So Richard was doing it, but Richard's fear was palpable even through the phone. What was he afraid of? I'll think about it, I heard myself say. After we hung up, I sat in my Philadelphia apartment with the city lights spread below my windows, trying to understand what just happened. I called Emma, my longest friend, the one who'd sheltered me 5 years ago. He invited you to the wedding? Emma's voice was skeptical. After 5 years of nothing? He said Oliver asks about me sometimes. And you believe that? Did I? I believe Richard's afraid of something. I could hear it in his voice. Afraid of what? I don't know yet. But people don't break 5 years of silence without a reason. I spent the next week considering. My therapist, Elena, said, "Why do you want to go? What would it give you?" Closure, I said. A chance to see Oliver, even from a distance. To know he's happy. And to show Richard what he lost, Elena added gently. Be honest. She was right. Part of me wanted Richard to see the woman he'd tried to erase, now composed and successful and whole. Wanted him to confront what he'd destroyed. That's not revenge, Elena said. That's justice. He tried to make you disappear. You showing up thriving is the best response you could give him. I consulted Anne Brennan, my attorney who'd become a friend. It's either a trap or an opportunity, Anne said. Probably both. If you go armored. Speak only when necessary. Observe everything. Give them nothing. Should I bring someone? A date? Anne considered. Showing up alone proves you don't need anyone to validate your existence. That's more powerful. I made my decision. I was attending Oliver's wedding. I treated the preparation like going to battle, because in many ways that's what it was. I found the perfect dress. Navy blue, elegant but not extravagant, sophisticated, without trying too hard. Something that said, I'm doing well, without screaming, I'm trying to impress you. I got my hair cut and styled professionally. Not dramatically different, just refined. The kind of polished look successful professional women wear. I practiced in front of my mirror. Not what I'd wear, but what I'd say if confronted. How have you been? I'd respond, I've been well, thank you. Where have you been? My answer, building a life for myself. Why did you leave? The truth. I left because I was being erased. I chose to exist elsewhere. Calm, boundaried, refusing to be drawn into drama. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect spring weather. I woke at 6, too anxious to sleep. I moved through my routine with mechanical precision. Coffee, shower, makeup that enhanced without announcing itself, the navy dress that fit perfectly. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who'd survived something designed to destroy her, who'd rebuilt from nothing into something solid and real. Good enough. The drive to Riverside Country Club took 40 minutes. I used the time to breathe, to center myself with yoga techniques I'd learned over 5 years of healing. I reminded myself with each breath, I don't need anything from these people. I'm attending because Oliver is still my son, because showing up is more powerful than hiding. The country club appeared like something from a luxury magazine. Marble columns, manicured grounds, valet parking for expensive vehicles. I drove past the valet, finding a regular spot where my practical sedan wouldn't look out of place. I sat there for 15 minutes watching guests arrive. Designer dresses, expensive suits, everyone looking like they belonged to this world of wealth and status. I'd never belonged here, even when married to Richard. But I'd built something better, something real and mine. I checked my reflection one last time, grabbed my small purse, and opened the car door. Time to remind them what they'd lost. The ceremony space was breathtaking. White roses everywhere, silk ribbons, candlelight making afternoons seem romantic. I found a seat in the back row, close enough to witness but far enough to slip away if needed. Around me, guests chatted comfortably. I recognized no one. 5 years had erased me so completely that Richard's entire social world had replaced me. The string quartet began. Guests quieted, stood, turned toward the entrance. Bridesmaids in sage green, groomsmen in tailored suits. Then Oliver appeared with Richard. My breath caught. Oliver, at 24, was stunning. Tall like his father, but with softer features he'd inherited from me. The tuxedo fit perfectly, probably custom-made. He looked confident, happy, adult. Richard looked exactly like what he was. Successful, distinguished, proud father. His suit was impeccable, his posture confident. They started down the aisle together, and I felt 5 years of missing compress into this moment. College graduation I hadn't attended. Birthdays uncelebrated. Holidays alone. All those mother-son moments I'd imagined having someday, stolen by systematic poisoning. Then Oliver's eyes found mine. The shock on his face was extraordinary. Pure disbelief, like seeing a ghost. His stride faltered mid-step. His mouth opened. His grip on Richard's arm tightened. He turned to Richard, whispered something urgent. Richard's head turned, following Oliver's gaze until his eyes landed on me. That's when I saw it happen. Richard's hands began to shake. Not subtle, visible trembling that he tried desperately to hide by gripping Oliver's arm tighter. His face went pale beneath his tan. His composed expression cracked like fine porcelain under pressure. Several guests noticed, exchanging concerned glances and whispered questions. He hadn't expected me to actually come. He'd invited me thinking I'd refuse, giving him moral high ground. We invited her, but she chose not to attend. Or maybe Oliver had insisted, and Richard called, assuming 5 years of silence meant I'd disappeared completely. But here I was, present, composed, whole, and Richard's carefully constructed world was tilting off its axis. They reached the altar, where a handsome young man waited. Sophia's groom, presumably. James Morrison, based on the program someone had handed me. He looked at Oliver like he was precious, which counted for something. Richard released Oliver's arm, hands still trembling, and stepped back to his seat. The officiant began speaking about love and commitment. I watched the ceremony unfold, but mostly I watched Richard. He kept glancing back toward my seat, composure slipping further each time. His face was a mask of fear, not of me specifically. I posed no physical threat, no legal danger. He was afraid of what I represented. The woman he'd systematically erased, who should have stayed erased. The wife he'd driven away, who should have stayed broken. But here I was, sitting calmly in the back row, wearing a nice dress and calm expression, having rebuilt myself into someone he no longer recognized or controlled. My mere presence threatened the narrative he'd spent 5 years building. The ceremony concluded with traditional kiss and pronouncement. I present Mr. and Mrs. James Morrison. Guests applauded. Oliver and Sophia walked back down the aisle, newlyweds glowing with youth and happiness. As they passed my brow, Oliver's eyes found mine again. This time the expression was different. Confusion mixed with something that might have been shame, or anger, or just complicated emotion seeing your mother for the first time in 5 years. I nodded once. A simple gesture. I see you. I came. I'm still your mother. Then they were past, surrounded by congratulations and photos. I stood quietly and walked toward the exit. I'd come for the ceremony. That was enough. I had no interest in the reception, in small talk with strangers who believed Richard's lies, in pretending I belonged to this world. I'd done what I came to do. Been present, visible, undeniable. I pushed through heavy doors into spring sunshine, warmth hitting my face like benediction. As I crossed the parking lot, I felt something unexpected. Lightness. The weight I'd carried for 5 years, the shame and questions and wondering if I'd failed, began lifting like fog burned by sun. I hadn't failed. I'd survived. I was unlocking my car when I heard footsteps running across pavement. "Judith, wait!" Richard's voice, breathless and urgent. I turned slowly, deliberately. He'd stopped about 10 feet away, wedding composure completely shattered. Face pale, tie askew, hands still trembling. "You came," he said, stating the obvious. "You invited me," I replied calmly. We stood there, two people who'd once promised forever, now strangers with 20 years of complicated history between us. "I didn't think you actually would," Richard admitted. "After everything." Sevens. "After everything you did to me, you mean?" I kept my tone neutral, factual. "After you systematically erased me from my own life? After you poisoned my relationship with my son? After you stole money and destroyed my reputation with calculated lies?" He flinched as if I'd struck him. "Judith, it wasn't supposed to. Things got out of hand." I almost laughed. "No, Richard. Things didn't get out of hand. You planned everything. The ignoring campaign, the financial transfers, the emails painting me as unstable. That wasn't spontaneous. That was calculated destruction." His expression shifted through shock that I knew, then something that looked almost like shame, quickly buried beneath defensiveness. "Judith, Sevens." I held up one hand, stopping him. "I don't need your explanation. I don't need your apology. I came today because Oliver is still my son, and I refuse to be erased from this important moment." "But I don't belong to your world anymore, Richard." I pulled my car keys from my purse, feeling steadier than I'd felt in years. And honestly, I met his eyes directly. "I'm grateful. You showed me exactly what I was worth to you, and it made me realize I was worth so much more to myself." I unlocked my car door. Richard stood there with whatever words he'd planned dying on his lips. "Wait," he said as I opened the door. "Sophia's family, they don't know. Jennifer doesn't know." Jennifer, the new wife. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that Richard remarried 2 years ago. Younger woman, bringing her own children into the marriage. "Jennifer doesn't know what?" I asked, though I already understood. "About how things ended. I told her you left, that you couldn't handle being a mother, that you chose your career over family." There it was. 5 years later, still lying, still controlling the narrative. "That's your problem, Richard. Not mine." I slid into the driver's seat. "You built a life on lies. Eventually, lies collapse. I hope you've prepared for that." I started the engine. Through the window, I could see Richard's face cycling through emotions. Anger, fear, something that might have been regret. I drove away without looking back. The drive home felt different than the drive there. Lighter. I'd faced them and survived. More than survived, I'd shown them exactly who I'd become without them. My phone buzzed as I merged onto the highway. Unknown number. A text. "Why did you come today?" No greeting, no signature, but I knew immediately. Oliver. I pulled into a rest stop, parked, and stared at those 4 words. Not, "Thank you for coming." Not, "I'm sorry we haven't talked." Just an accusation. Why did you come? As if my presence had been an intrusion. I typed several responses, deleted them all, finally settled on truth. Because you're still my son. Even if you've forgotten, I'm still your mother. When you're ready to talk honestly, without your father coaching you, I'll be here. I love you, Oliver. Always have. Nothing changes that. I sent it before I could second-guess myself, then turned off my phone completely. Whatever Oliver did with that information was his choice. 3 months after the wedding, my phone rang at work. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Ms. Morris? This is Sophia Morrison, Oliver's wife. The voice was young, female, nervous. Could we talk? My heart rate accelerated. Of course. What's this about? I need to understand something. About you and Oliver's father. About why you weren't at the wedding reception. Why Oliver never talks about you. Why everything feels wrong. We met at a neutral café in Philadelphia 2 days later. Sophia was 24, beautiful, Chinese American, wearing her new marriage like she wasn't quite sure it fit properly yet. Oliver tells me one story about you, she said after we'd ordered coffee. His father tells me another, and neither story makes sense with the woman I met at the wedding. What do Oliver and Richard tell you? That you left when Oliver was 19. That you couldn't handle being a mother, chose your career over family. That you had adjustment issues, being from England. That you've been unstable, unreliable. She paused. But the woman at the wedding looked successful and composed. And the way Richard reacted when he saw you, that wasn't the reaction of someone whose unstable ex-wife showed up. That was fear. Smart woman. What did Oliver say about my being there? He wouldn't talk about it. Got angry when I asked questions. But the next day, I found him looking at old photos on his phone. Pictures of you and him when he was little. He was crying. My chest tightened. My son, crying over old photos. Sophia, what do you want to know? The truth. Whatever it is. So I told her. Not everything, but enough. The systematic erasure, the financial abuse, the poisoning of my relationship with Oliver through calculated lies. The divorce papers with a sticky note. Walking out because staying would have destroyed me completely. Sophia listened with the focused attention of someone trained to see patterns. Oliver doesn't know any of this? Your husband was 19 when I left. His father had spent months building a narrative that I was unreliable and unstable. From Oliver's perspective, I did abandon him. He doesn't know about the money transfers, the professional sabotage, the documented lies. He only knows his father's version. Does evidence exist? Court documents from the divorce. All public record if you know where to look. Sophia was quiet for a long moment. I need to show him. He deserves to know the truth about his family. That's your decision, Sophia. But be prepared. Learning your father is not who you thought is devastating. Oliver might not be ready to accept it. He needs to be ready, Sophia said firmly. Because Richard's doing the same thing to Jennifer. I've seen the signs, the controlling behavior, the dismissive comments, the way he isolates her from decisions. It's a pattern. A pattern. Of course it was. Abusers don't change without intervention. There's something else, Sophia added. Oliver asks about you, When he thinks I'm not listening, he'll mention something you used to do, something you used to say. He misses you, Ms. Morris. He's just been told for 5 years that missing you makes him weak. 6 weeks later, I received an email. Oliver's address, subject line, empty, message, simple. Can we talk? Just us? We met at the same neutral café. Oliver looked older than at his wedding, more worn. Marriage and truth-telling had aged him. Sophia showed me the court documents, he said without preamble. The bank transfers, the emails to my school counselor, everything. I nodded, saying nothing. I didn't know. His voice cracked. I thought you just left. Dad said you couldn't handle being a mother, that you'd always been unstable. I believed him. You were 19, Oliver. You believed the parent who stayed, who seemed stable. That's natural. I called you selfish. He was crying now, tears running down his face in the middle of a cafe. I told you that you were putting yourself above me. I signed an affidavit saying you were unreliable. I helped him destroy you. This was the moment I'd imagined for 5 years. My son understanding the truth, apologizing, wanting reconciliation. But now that it was happening, I felt less triumph and more sadness for all we'd lost. Oliver, you were a teenager who believed his father. Children are supposed to trust their parents. Richard abused that trust. But I'm not a teenager anymore. I'm 24. I've been married 6 months. And I destroyed my relationship with my mother because I never questioned his version of events. You're questioning now. Is that enough? He looked at me with such raw pain. Can you forgive me for what I did? Could I? I'd spent 5 years rebuilding myself, learning to live without my son's love, accepting that our relationship might be permanently broken. Forgiveness isn't something I can just hand you, Oliver. What you did, supporting your father's lies, hurt me deeply. But you were also a victim of his manipulation. Parental alienation is abuse, and you were abused too. Where do we go from here? Therapy, I said firmly. Individual for you, to process what your father did and your own choices. Eventually, maybe family therapy together. This isn't something we fix over coffee. Oliver. This is years of damage that will take years to heal, if it heals at all. Will you try to rebuild something with me? I looked at my son, my child who'd called me white noise and selfish, who'd sided with his father against me, who was now confronting the devastation of learning his family was built on lies. I'll try, but I won't set myself on fire to keep you warm. I have boundaries now, Oliver. A life that doesn't revolve around earning your love. If we rebuild a relationship, it will be because we both choose it, not because I need it to feel whole. Oliver started individual therapy the following month. I heard updates through Sophia, who'd become an unexpected ally. She told me about Oliver's sessions, his struggles confronting his father's abuse, his guilt over his own complicity. Richard's world continued unraveling. Jennifer filed for separation after discovering financial irregularities, the same pattern of separate accounts and mysterious transfers he'd used with me. Sophia's family, wealthy and well-connected, conducted background checks after the wedding and found divorce records Richard hadn't disclosed completely. His reputation in professional circles suffered when Jennifer's lawyer filed documents outlining financial abuse patterns. Colleagues who'd believed Richard's narrative about his unstable first wife started questioning everything. Richard tried to contact me twice, once through email, asking me to clarify our divorce for Jennifer's lawyer. I forwarded the request to Anne Brennan without responding. Once through a mutual acquaintance, asking if we could clear the air about our marriage. I declined. Richard wasn't entitled to my energy, my forgiveness, or my help cleaning up the mess his lies created. A year after the wedding, Oliver and I met monthly for coffee. Careful conversations, both of us navigating new territory. He told me about his job in marketing, his struggles in therapy, his marriage to Sophia. I told him about my work, my life in Philadelphia, my travels to Cornwall. We didn't discuss Richard unless Oliver brought it up. The relationship with his father had deteriorated to minimal contact, cards on birthdays, obligation rather than connection. He's alone now, Oliver said one afternoon. Jennifer left, took her kids. His colleagues don't socialize with him anymore. He's just alone. How do you feel about that? Sad, angry, relieved. Oliver stirred his coffee. Is that terrible? Being relieved that my father's suffering? It's human. He destroyed relationships through calculated cruelty. Consequences feel like justice. Sophia says the best revenge is living well. Oliver smiled slightly. She says you're the perfect example. Living well. That had become my truth. 2 years after the wedding, Sophia gave birth to a daughter, Clara Margaret Morrison, middle name chosen to honor the grandmother she'd never meet, but whose inheritance had saved her mother's life. Oliver called to tell me, "We'd like you to be in Clara's life, as her grandmother, if you want that." Did I? Being grandmother meant vulnerability, risk of being hurt again, opening my heart to people who'd already damaged it once. But Clara was innocent. A new generation, clean slate. I'd like that. But with boundaries, Oliver. I'm not the on-call babysitter. I'm not dropping everything whenever convenient for you. I'm a grandmother who also has her own life. I understand. And Mum, thank you for trying, for not giving up on me completely. 5 years after the wedding, I stood in Cornwall at my mother's estate, overlooking the Atlantic. The property had been fully renovated, featured in design magazines, booked solid year-round with luxury travelers seeking authentic English coastal experience. My book's second edition had just been published, expanded with new material about transgenerational healing and chosen family. I'd been invited to speak at a TED conference about resilience and reinvention. My relationship with Oliver remained cautious but real. We had Sunday video calls. I visited Clara twice a year, careful not to overstay, maintaining boundaries that protected my peace. Oliver continued therapy, working through damage that would probably take decades to fully process. Richard sent a letter 6 months earlier. Long, rambling, attempting something that might have been apology. He'd lost his job, his home, most of his social connections. He was 63 and alone, facing consequences of decades of abusive behavior. The letter asked if we could talk, said he understood now what he'd done, that he wanted to make amends. I didn't respond. Richard's redemption wasn't my responsibility. He'd have to find healing on his own, just as I had. My chosen family filled my life with genuine connection. Emma, who'd sheltered me at my lowest point. Elena, my therapist who'd become a dear friend. Margaret and James, colleagues who valued my expertise and enjoyed my company. The book club, the hiking group, the architecture community. People who saw me, valued me, chose me, not because biology obligated them, but because they genuinely wanted me in their lives. Standing on those Cornwall cliffs, I thought about Judith at 43, holding divorce papers with a sticky note saying, "Sign here." Broken, scared, believing she'd lost everything. I wished I could tell her, "You didn't lose everything. You lost people who didn't value you. And in losing them, you found yourself. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's not making them suffer or forcing them to acknowledge what they did. The best revenge is becoming so completely whole without them that their regret becomes background noise you don't need to hear." I'd been systematically erased. And I'd redrawn myself, stronger and clearer than before. My phone buzzed. A text from Clara, now 3 years old, dictated by Sophia. "Nana Jude, when you visit, can we make cookies?" I smiled, typing back, "Absolutely. Any flavor you want, my darling." New generation. New stories. New legacy built on truth instead of lies. Richard had tried to make me disappear. Instead, He'd freed me to become exactly who I was always meant to be. And that, surviving, thriving, building genuine love after systematic destruction, that was power enough. If this story of quiet strength and walking away resonated with you, please subscribe. My favorite part was Judith standing in the back row, watching Richard's hands shake, realizing her survival was the greatest revenge. What was your favorite moment? Share in the comments below. And remember, the people who erase you are showing you exactly who deserves your energy. Believe them and choose yourself.